Azsha Hudson, thank you for being with us. Azsha's from EDC and is, well, it's on the agenda, which I didn't manage to put in front of me with your job title. But we're glad to have you to talk about this. The sanctuary, I will say, I wish that we're Johnny come lately on this topic, and it's on me. I wish we would have had this on our agenda 2 or 3 years ago and been following it all along. And now we're near the end of the process. Hopefully, we're real close to the end of it, and it's going to get designated. And without our having to wade in, but I wish we had, but I want us to be informed. And so that's what this is about. Azsha, thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. Azsha Hudson, the Marine Conservation Analyst and Program Manager with the Environmental Defense Center. I've been there 2 years come July. And so I was asked to give this presentation to you guys on the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. Like Ken said, hopefully it's going to be designated soon. Hopefully before elections in November is designated. And so I will give a brief overview based off of the documents, the released EIS, and then some of the updates that came a little bit later in the process in the beginning of this year. So let me just share my screen. Okay. All right, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Great. All right, so like I said, Chumash Heritage Sanctuary. For those of you who need a little bit more orientation, this is the initial boundary that was proposed by NOAA. This was what was submitted by the Northern Chumash Tribal Council. This has, as you can see, it connects right up to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and it does not have that Gaviota extension as everybody has been requesting for the comments that were submitted. This is the proposed boundary alternative 2. As you can see, it has this carve out right here and right here. These were for the offshore wind platforms and planning that is going to happen. And that platform would probably be, the platforms rather, not just one, would be here where the 2 leaseholders would be. And then here is the Gaviota extension. So what most people, including EDC, submitted in their letters was a request for the initial boundary plus the Gaviota extension. The agency staff, NOAA staff, were recommending, this alternative 2. And that was, again, because of the offshore wind. So why a sanctuary here? A new sanctuary would protect the vistas, aesthetic reasons. You get it would have been one of the biggest marine sanctuaries, if not the biggest, based off of the initial and Gaviota extension boundaries in the US. There would be continuity between the Monterey Bay Sanctuary and then slightly between the Channel Island Sanctuary. There's, of course, the cultural relationship the Chumash and Salinan peoples have with this area. And then you also have the biological and physical resources. There we go. Just to touch a little bit on some of the cultural resources. So you have where the Morro Rock, which is believed to be the Western Gate for souls to pass through. You have ancestral territory. There may be some ancient tribes that have leftover artifacts underwater. So there's marine artifacts that is currently underwater. There may even be some along the beaches. So that cultural resource needs to be protected. And then you have a few other culturally significant areas, Point Conception, the Channel Islands, of course, but this is by no means an extensive list. This is, 3 out of many things that Indigenous peoples are very tied to and have every right to protect. And then this is a long list of biological and physical resources that would be protected under the sanctuary. I'm not going to get into all of these. That would make this presentation probably an hour long instead of a quick, 10, 15 minutes. And then here comes hopefully the fun part. So just to go over some of the animals that would be protected under the sanctuary, you have the pink-footed shearwater, one of the species that is largely found offshore over relatively shallow waters. Then you have the black brant, a coastal species that migrates to California during the winter. You have the Pacific loon. It's another migratory species that stays along the coastline and is open during the winter. And then of course you have humpback whales. Estimated population on the US West Coast is about 597 individuals. Some of these individuals make a round trip journey of about 10,000 miles. And then you have sea otters, cute but very vicious sometimes. And then the sea otter habitat is among the kelp forest. And then southern sea otters are generally smaller than northern, fun fact. And one of my favorite, you have sharks of all types in this area. Spiny dogfish, you have tiger shark, you can have angel shark, which are currently being overfished. You have leopard sharks, one of my favorite that you can go snorkeling with in La Jolla.
Wow.
Yes, lovely. I love sharks. And then you have bluefin tuna, largest tuna, and can live up to 40 years. Then you have white shark, of course. Then you have Opa, delicious. Groundfish, of course, and leatherback sea turtles. Again, not an extensive list of what would be protected. These are just some of the more iconic species that are everybody kind of knows off the top of their head when they think of species in the Southern California bight. And then to go over some geographic hotspots, you have Rodriguez Seamount, you have Arguello Canyon, you have Point Bouchon, you have Point Sal, you have Point Arguello, I may have said that wrong,
No,
and then you have Point Conception, of course. And then the green dots are the different geographic hotspots. Oh, sorry. And then you also have some MPAs in this general area that you have Kashiet, I may have pronounced that wrong, SMCA, which is close to Point Conception, and then you have Naples and Campus Point as well. So threats. Offshore wind, I already pointed this out, and not a threat in the sense that it's going to stop sanctuary designation. It was a threat in the sense of it kind of impeded and was a bump in the road for sanctuary designation. That's why you did see that discrepancy between the initial boundary and then the preferred boundary. You had those two carve outs. Those were for offshore wind development, specifically the transmission cables. No actual turbines or substations would be in the area of the sanctuary, the initial sanctuary boundary, but it's the landing of the cables to get to onshore. So of course we can use that energy that the turbines generate. You also have vessel traffic and ship strikes, another area that EDC is very interested in slowing the vessels down in order to kind of reduce impact to whale. And then also you have the benefit of air emissions, finding cleaner air, coastal development, plastic and other pollution from offshore and onshore sources, climate change, and sound. So just to give you a little bit of an understanding of what I mean by vessel traffic. So you have the vessel traffic lanes, and this red boundary right here is where they cannot go into, and then you have the blue lines, looks like 3 of them. 3 blue lines shows what the lanes actually are. Supposed to be 10, well, they're not supposed to be. There is a voluntary vessel speed program that they can opt into where they can choose to go 10 knots or below, and it was set up where they could get some type of monetary reimbursement, not a lot in the grand scheme of what these companies are making. But a lot of them kind of sent the money back for the publicity that came with, hey, we're slowing down and we're helping, the whales and helping air quality. And then, of course, one of the big selling points for this area is you have the oil and gas platforms. Most of them are non-operational. We're in the planning stages of decommissioning. There was some documents released for that, and that process has begun. But you still have these platforms in the water, and we don't want more platforms in the water. So getting this sanctuary designated will protect a very large swath of the California coast from any industrial practices, any new industrial practices. So you have, here is the original proposed bound, oops, sorry. Just to refresh your guys' memory, this is the original proposed boundary with the Morro Bay call area. So this is where this blue, apologies, the blue section is where the actual turbines would go for offshore wind. And then to the updates of this year. So as you saw, the initial boundary, and then there was a preferred boundary. We currently do not know what the boundary is going to look like, but you can assume that it is not going to be the initial boundary. It's going to probably look more so like the preferred that was indicated by NOAA staff. With the Gaviota extension, most likely. With the full boundary where it connects back to Monterey Bay being applied maybe after the offshore wind build out happens and the transmission cables go in. I know there has been conversation with a bunch of people up in federal. The NCTC team has been having many conversations with getting strong language written in the documents that the full boundary will be implemented after 10 years after the turbines have been put in water. That's still being fleshed out, and I do not know the exact trigger for that expansion, but language is being written, and I believe a timeline hopefully will be in there. It's not going to take 20, 30, 40 years. It should happen relatively soon. Then you also had when this was all coming about, we had the leaseholders telling us that the transmission cables couldn't go through a sanctuary. And so EDC with a bunch of other organizations tried to do our own research. We looked into special use permits. That was shot down because you would have to reapply every 5 years. And some of the leaseholders said that that was not a viable option because of that 5-year application. However, from our understanding, historically, there has been no case where you get the special use permit and then it's not renewed. It's usually renewed every single time after that. And then we had the ONMS authorization. It was a potential permitting mechanism for cables. This solution was shot down by ONMS. I'm not sure who specifically decided that this was not an option or a pathway for keeping that sanctuary, the full initial sanctuary with the Gaviota extension and just having the cables permitted through that. But nonetheless, that was not accepted as a solution. However, there is precedent set for the sanctuary being established at a smaller scale, and then after a certain time period or some type of trigger, it then expands. You have that in the Florida Keys, Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, and I believe even Monterey Bay had something similar. And then finally, just to give you a little bit of background for EDC stance, we support the Northern Chumash Tribal Council in accepting a phased-in approach. And we also want to see interim protection of the excluded area from extractive activities, oil and gas, seabed mining, etc., and a firm timeline for expansion. And then that is the end of my presentation. I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Azsha. So Who has a question? There's something in the chat. Sarah says, beautiful presentation. And
Thank
let's see,
you.
is there a question in there? Um,
What do
Yeah.
you anticipate as the timeline for getting a decision back from a policy standpoint? What's next?
Honestly, I can't really answer that. A lot of what's happening is a little bit behind closed doors right now. So we know that Congress still has to get it, approve it, and I believe the California governor still has to do that process as well. And I'm going to mess up these numbers, but I believe it's a 45 to 60 day period that they have from getting the designation document to review it and then approve it. And so hopefully, from what I've been hearing, that they should have that in their hands pretty soon to get that next step rolling. But once it's in Congress's hand, and then of course California governor, usually by that point it should. I'm sorry. There should be something that's happening right now, that once that gets approved, I believe by all of the agencies that are involved, so NOAA, of course, DOE, DOJ probably, and a few others are reviewing the document and approving it themselves. And usually once all the agencies approve it, I believe it's kind of like, it's not a done deal, but you can take a little bit of a sigh of relief, like, okay, the agencies have gotten it through. There was nothing that hindered them from getting that established, and then sending it to Congress and the governor. That too should hopefully not be any pitfalls or speed bumps. I know when Violet Sage Walker attended a Chow event the previous week or 2 weeks ago, she said that she got the feeling that a lot of congressmen and a lot of legislators were excited for this and wanted to get it designated. So it seemed like what they're saying is most of them were of support of it. So really we just want to get it before the November, hopefully, I believe late summer.
Does it have any negative impacts from the standpoint of the oil companies? Is it gonna stop them?
I mean, so it would stop them from doing any new exploratory or putting in new platforms. The ones that are already in the water would technically be grandfathered in if they were still operational, but and Linda would probably be a much better person. She's been working on this much longer than I think I may have been alive. But not she, the most platforms, at least in the Santa Barbara Channel, are not operational. And I don't know really of that much that are in operation along the coast that would be under the Chumash Heritage Sanctuary. Um, but yeah, so it would be more protection for future endeavors than any current actions currently happening.
Do you know whether any of the oil companies are voicing opposition to the proposal?
Not that I have heard specifically. I wouldn't be surprised if they were. Um, but yeah, I don't have anything that I can, say Chevron or anybody directly or Sable or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions?
So I can't remember the map well enough. So are the platforms Exxon wants to transfer to Sable within the sanctuary? They're south of it. Okay.
Yes.
I have a question, and maybe you answered this. Are the Chumash okay with that alternative plan?
So Violet and so NCTC, along with some of the leaseholders, submitted a letter to NOAA and possibly the White House. I could have that wrong, apologies. But they did submit a letter a few weeks ago saying, we do not want offshore wind impeding on, you know, the sanctuary designation, and we don't want the designation stopping offshore wind. And so within that letter, they did say that NCTC supports that reduced boundary size. However, we are helping them work to get that specific language in the management documents that the expansion is going to happen, you know, just what that trigger would be.
The expansion to include the wind area later after the wind is developed.
No, so let me pull that up real quick so I can show you, so we can have something to talk about, tangible to talk about.
Or you're talking about the Gaviota.
Yes.
Okay, got that. So they would be okay with the alternative plus the Gaviota expansion.
Yes. So, oops, where am I? So the offshore wind would be here. It would be over here. And so what this boundary shows is like, it's not for the offshore wind turbines and substations. So like the actual like windmills going in the water, it's for the cables that are connecting the turbines to land to get that electricity that's generated to land. And so that's what this carve out's for. It's not for the actual turbines and physical structures.
Right.
It's for the cables that would probably be buried. But yes.
Okay.
So what you're saying is after the cables are buried, then that boundary then reaches back up to the Monterey Bay
So
sanctuary?
it could.
It-
I'm
yeah,
not saying that it
okay.
would. Yeah, that's
But
still
that's
to
what
be
they're
determined.
working.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what
Yeah,
we're
that-
asking for.
Yeah.
We're helping NCTC ask for is that once these cables are laid, to have that boundary, you know, then extend over it to cover it. We're also asking for, while that space is open technically, because the sanctuary is not covering that area, that area is removed from any oil and gas, seabed mining, exploratory activities. So really just removing it from any industrialization at all, with BOEM, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds better than not having it ever connect, you know, ever. But, you know, if there are cultural things that are important under the water, you know, it's so hard for the Chumash, I'm sure. They have to make concessions like that. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's been a lot of concern because it's taken us so long, or it's been 10 or 12 years. We've all been working on, I do lobbying work for the Sierra Club in DC, among other areas. And I'm told when I knock on doors in DC that the sanctuary won't be created till the end of this year. I think the Biden administration is very hesitant to make any moves during an election year that may jeopardize the president's reelection. And I had a couple of discussions with two of the biggest sanctuaries on our nation, were to be national marine sanctuaries, one off the northeast coast of the United States and one off the western area of Hawaii, were designated by President George W. and President Obama, respectively, as marine national monuments. That's something that takes minutes to do with a president signing a document in the Oval Office, and then you fill in the blanks later. I think a lot of us were wishing maybe we had taken that route when this first started, where we are. But I'm worried myself from what I'm hearing is that if it puts it in too late into this year, nobody has any idea what's going to happen on November 5th, but there is the possibility there could be a different administration, which would be very hostile. And if we put it into late in the year with a decision, then some of the paperwork documents would go into early 2025, which could spell trouble if the wrong person enters the White House. So it's been a long, frustrating journey for many of us.
Yeah, definitely part of this process that I've learned is that what you hear changes, you know, in a snap of a finger.
Yep.
You know, we were hearing what you heard, Jim, for a while, still kind of hearing whispers of that, but the recent trip that Chairwoman Violet took, you know, like I said, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, seemed to have a little bit more positive spin on this.
Yeah.
So I'm just taking the stance. I'm gonna keep optimistic and be
Yes.
positive that they do get this before November.
Mhm. If it doesn't happen and the voters decide a different person to be in the White House on November 5th, we should put a lot of pressure on perhaps outgoing President Biden to sign an executive order that creates a national monument, which, like I said earlier, the president can do in minutes.
Mm.
But the incoming president can change that in minutes too,
That
right?
is true. We have that problem too.
Yeah.
But it's worth a try.
Yeah, I mean, I would prefer, you know, this gets through Congress, this
Yeah.
gets through, you know, the process that it's in now, because then a president can't overturn that. You would need Congress to go back and make the decision, right? And getting all of Congress to probably do that a second time to revoke the sanctuary is a little bit more of a harder push.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there are a few options. I think we're at the point now where compromise has happened 10 times over. And now and I just came into this late. I can't imagine people have been doing this 10, 12 years where they just, please just get it designated.
Yeah, right.
Any other questions?
Well, I want to thank you for the presentation, and I want to thank Jim for working on this for the last decade plus. And as I said at the outset, Johnny come lately, I wish we'd have been paying, we knew about it, but it's just all the other things that SBCAN deals with. It wasn't something that we knew there were so many others dealing with it. Sometimes we deal with stuff, which is the third item on our agenda today, that nobody else is picking up and going after, so that we're doing that. But anyway, it's such an important thing, and I wish we were on record supporting this and able to weigh in on the nuances that have been dealt with in these last months. But I'm glad that those who are here got some education on it and that our staff have. And so thank you very, very kindly. Anybody else? Any last question or comment?
You think we still need to keep putting the pressure on?
Yeah, oh, yes.
Okay,
Everywhere, and anybody who will listen, the more support, even though the quote unquote public comment periods are over, putting pressure on Congress, members of Congress. Absolutely.
okay.
So
And
this
can
is,
you send me a blurb to for an action item for the calendar that I send out every week?
Oh, sure. I'm not familiar with your calendar. But yeah,
I'll put my email in the chat.
okay.
and I presume our local Congress member is on board.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Mhm.
So
It's the ones in inland states that are red that are the problem.
yeah, and so who we have no influence over.
Yeah, right. Mhm. If
We're
you know
lucky if
anybody
we
in
have any
Richmond-
influence with Salud. Sometimes we do. We know him
Mhm.
well. But I mean,
There you go.
thank you.
Well, thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Azsha. And are you going to stick around? We got the next item. You might know something about this next item. The points of Marine
Unfortunately, I don't know anything about the Point Sal one. I know about Mashopshno and I know about the one EDC is working on. But Point Sal, I cannot help with at all, unfortunately.
Do you have to go, or do you want to stay and hear a little about it and maybe tell us about these other ones? Because Jeannie and I know something about the Point Sal, but not anything.
Yeah, I'm happy to stay for Point Sal and give a little bit for Mashopshno and Anacapa.
Thank you. That'd be great. All right. So marine protected areas. So we just transitioned from a federal designation to a state designation, which is limited to 3 miles offshore. And we've only just learned in the last couple of months about what's in the works. At least I have. So I learned that 10 or 11 years ago, there was established the Marine Protected Area, and more than just that, but MPAs are one of the things. And there's a couple others that are part of that. And so they were designated, and there's certain areas were designated, not including Point Sal, but other places along the coast. And so it's a 10-year review that happened about a year ago, that started about a year ago, and people were asked if they had input for any changes that ought to be made to what was established 10 years ago. And so there were some proposed for within Santa Barbara County, and one was Point Sal. And so we were invited to a meeting where the proponents of that were briefing a member of the council of the Guadalupe City Council. So Jeannie and I went to that meeting and learned quite a bit about the Point Sal proposal. And Jeannie, do you have a map to pop up on the
I do,
screen?
and I wanted to start to show some of the existing marine protected areas, and then I'll go to the Point Sal proposal. So here is some that go from Santa Cruz County, Año Nuevo, down the coast to Vandenberg. So there is a marine protected, well, it's a state marine reserve right there. They have 4 different levels. Well, and actually more than that, but you can see the different colors: state marine reserve, state marine conservation area, state marine recreational management area, state marine park / conservation area, California maritime limits, and national marine sanctuary. So you've got you've got all these designations on here. So the National Resource Defense Council, I'm trying to think, is that the name of the group we were talking with, NRDC? And so they're proposing, let me get over to this other map, see if I can switch to, okay, I'm gonna have to do, a new share. Okay, here we go. This is what they're proposing for the Point Sal area, is that they would have from Muscle Point to south of Point Sal, and I think they had a name for this area right down here, which I can't remember what it's called. Was it Paradise Beach, maybe?
Paradise Beach is the one where your cursor is now, to the north.
Oh, okay.
That's Paradise, and then one that's part of the state park is where it says Point Sal Beach. So there's
Okay.
one, if you move the cursor down, anyway.
Yeah, it says Point Sal State Beach right here. And of course, this is Point Sal. So this is the area they're proposing, and there's a couple of different levels of protection that they're looking at. And they'd like to see what people who frequent these areas think about a protected area. The most protection would preclude anybody from even fishing there and doing individual catch, but the next level down would allow for some fishing, and they need to find out whether anybody's really actually fishing in this area, and whether that would be an issue, or if they could go for the most protection. So they're asking people to, right now, they're just trying to spread the word a little bit. They're going to have some more information for us, hopefully in a couple of weeks, that we could start to get the information out to people and query them about what they'd like. But they also are asking for input before that. And if I went to my notes, I'd probably be making a little more sense. So I'm going to turn this back to Ken.
Wait a minute.
Gotta find my notes. What did they tell us?
Well, I mean, for one, yeah, all what you said is accurate. Now, people that fish at the top of this map, right where it says proposed point, that's where Guadalupe Beach is, and most of the fishers are there that fish from land.
Mm-hmm.
And Muscle Point is about a 2-mile hike down the sand. And then it's really hard, if even possible, to get over Muscle Point down to that Paradise Beach. And the other beaches down at the southern end of this map, they're a 10-mile round trip hike. I've been there, and I didn't make it down to the beach because the last little bit is treacherous. But I was, and it was treacherous. I mean, it was 8 miles or 9 miles round trip just to get out there where I had a good look at the beach. But I have seen pictures where there are people, four people fishing on that Point Sal beach. So it does happen, but it's a long hike. Most people fish up north. So that I think I know that the point of what NRDC is talking about is if you designate an area like this and you have this protection, fish will grow bigger and thrive in this area. And then some of them are gonna swim out and they're gonna go up the beach. And somebody up at the beach where they get out of their cars and walk across the beach and go fishing, they're gonna catch maybe a bigger fish than they would otherwise. So there's an advantage to the fishers that are currently heading out there to Guadalupe Beach that they may not realize. And it's where, if you read all the material, and there's a 10 or 20 page part of this 900-page report that has a dozen proposals for these expansions. So this one has a number of pages, and I read it. And people that go out there and fish, they're not going to read it. So maybe this, I wouldn't think they're going to read this whole report and get it. They're more likely to say, well, wait, restrictions on fishing, forget it. They're going to be against it.
So
But
Ken,
action.
what about people who, what about our fishing fleets? Does anybody go
Yeah.
out Morro Bay and fish
So
from
yes,
their
thank you.
boats?
Yeah, and they do. And so the report that the NRDC material that's in this long report says that about something about 0.13% of the catch at Morro Bay and to Santa Barbara is from this area. So a very, very small proportion of the catch that gets landed commercially is from here, but a little bit of it is. And so there's another source of opposition, and probably more effective source of opposition if the people in the fleets out of the two harbors say, no, we don't want this. That would be important, and it'll probably happen. So some of the stuff that I read leading up to the meeting we were invited to was in a blog from Santa Cruz, and people were up in arms about it. And surfers and land fishers were up in arms about it. But there were a lot of the same arguments being made by NRDC that it was about kelp beds there, and a lot of this is about kelp beds too, because the fish love the kelp beds, and you want to protect the kelp beds to help the fish grow bigger. And when they can do that, they swim away, and they might get caught somewhere else. But anyway, yeah, that's thanks for the question, Gail. And it's a very small percentage, but it's
Can I
important.
jump in and just say, from having watched rather closely the negotiations involving not just all of the northern MPAs and that process, but also the one around the Channel Islands and closer to us. There tends to be a resistance to bringing the fishermen into the process and mapping it. But when you bring them in and they participate, and the ones that do participate actively, because look at the size of those little, these are not necessarily humongous MPAs, and they vary. Some they're protecting just the bottom area or the middle of the column. They're not protecting all of the waters. It depends on a lot of things. When they did the Channel Islands ones, some of the Santa Barbara fishermen participated pretty actively, and they came up. Sorry about that. They came up with sort of 100 different possible solutions for the boundaries. And
Wow.
the Ventura fishermen who did not participate kind of got shafted. And the people who did participate actively didn't get shafted. You have to understand that fishermen fishing from boats, the people who are doing this for a living, we're not talking about the people who are subsistence fishing off of the land points. The other people, they know whose territory is whose territory. They do not encroach on some other fisherman's territory. And they know what the boundaries are, and they will not draw them for you. But they know, and the only way to come out with a fair and reasonable solution is, to find a way to bring them into the process and develop a process that allows them to participate and share what they know in a way that is more private. And I guess this is probably not nearly as hot an area as when we did this off of, in our area, close to, this southern part of the state. So, I mean, I'm very much a fan of the fishermen in our port who have, participated in this process, and they've also learned that these boundaries can be useful, although they would certainly like to go back after X number of years and be able to shift the boundaries, have other areas restored, and be able to harvest some of those lobsters inside the area, and they do fish on the line. But I'm also a big fan of paying attention to the social impacts of creating these marine areas and bringing the fishermen into the process.
So I wanted to add to the conversation that the southern extent of it is Browns Beach, the beach, I couldn't think of the name. So Muscle Point to Browns Beach. And they're looking either at a reserve, which is the highest level of protection, which would allow no taking of anything, but recreation would be allowed, or a conservation area, which would allow a specific take. Now, if we want to take into account whether there's any local fishermen going there, it was probably something we should investigate. I think, Ken, you said it was 0.1% of all the fishing along the Central Coast was from that area.
That's the commercial take that comes ashore in Monterey and Morro Bay and Santa Barbara. Less than 0.2% of the take was from this area.
Yeah, so it seems like that's a very small amount that there probably wouldn't be definitely wouldn't be a lot of impact, but it might be impact to some specific fishermen that we might want to consider.
As Gail, sorry, Jeannie, but as Gail pointed out, there's some of the commercial fishers, they've got their territory, and others say, okay, well, that's so-and-so's, and I'm not going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's whoever it is that's got that less than 0.2% that's getting it. There might be a very small number of commercial fishers. Those are the ones that ought to be identified and talked
Yeah.
to. And
You also want to know, the squid boats come from farther away. Is there squid fishing in there? Do we have the whole fleet of squid fishermen?
There was nothing in all the stuff I read that mentioned squid, but there, I don't know.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So is one of the reasons that this area is being proposed due to the fact that access to the beach is very difficult, as you mentioned, Ken, and I think there are a number of different landowners that restrict access to the beach. So you'll have to kind of go on the beach and follow it all the way down.
So yeah,
It's my understanding, at least in the past, it used to be owned by, let's see, state, BLM, maybe Vandenberg, and then maybe some private land ownership. But what's going on with the land ownership part of this?
So there is all of that. When I walked out there to what's the name of the beach, Jeannie, between Browns and Paradise? It's Point Sal Beach. So when I walked out to Point Sal Beach and I crossed a little bit of private land, some public land, and a little bit of Vandenberg. And I was worried I was trespassing, but that's where the trail went. The reason they're targeting, that NRDC is proposing this area, isn't because it's remote and hard to access, but because of the nature of the water and the resources that are right there by the point. It's unique. There are kelp beds there that aren't found offshore from the Guadalupe beach, and so it's a rich area, a lot of diverse aquatic life. So that's the reason why. And their proposal actually has stuff in it about making it more accessible to get out there, because it is so hard to get there. Jeannie's been out there because her parents took her there 40 or 50 years ago.
When I was a kid, it was a long time ago.
It was accessible then. There was a road that got you out there, and then you could, I guess, scramble down to the beach because you
But
weren't exhausted from the hike.
The parents would drive all the way close to the beach. There was some place where you could actually park down there, but as kids, we like to scramble down the hill, so we would do that. But I
So-
don't know. I haven't been down to the beach in a long time. I've been up on the top of the point since I've been an adult, but not since I was a kid.
So
Yeah,
NRDC
yeah.
the NRDC suggests some improvements, nothing specific, but they acknowledge the need to make it more accessible and to try to alleviate the potholes and maybe make it so you could get motor vehicles out there. And others, I don't know that that's going to be practical. There's too much erosion along the way, and it just may not be practical, but maybe there could be a better trail or some way to make it more accessible. It's a beautiful place, but you have to have a lot of time and maybe some different equipment to be able to really get out there to that beach.
Yeah, and I can say that when I used to work for BLM, that was actually, there's a very important Native American cultural site at Point Sal. So I don't know, I guess I'd hate to see that destroyed or damaged, but that's a whole nother story. I think the land access issue would be really hard to tackle, but yeah, it's a beautiful area, and yeah, it'd be great to reserve it. Sorry for the fishermen, but that's my point of view.
Well,
But the Fisher people might be better off if this was protected. That's NRDC's point, because if this is protected, a lot of fish might just grow bigger and thrive, and then they leave the area and then they get caught.
so what's happening next with this is that there is a meeting in July where the commission is going to consider
Which commission?
yeah, that's the name. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
Well, it's the
hmm?
Park and
Fish and Game.
Fish and Game Commission.
Vision Game, yeah. And they're gonna look at the different petitions that are brought to them or the different issues that they'll need to address, and they're gonna decide whether to evaluate this one, and I guess all of them, whether they'll make a decision this year or next year. So once NRDC knows that, then they'll have a timeline on what they're gonna need to do next. So they'll get back to us. They want to create something that makes it easy for us to summarize this and give information, and to get a petition out there that people would sign asking for this one to be considered as an MPA. So we don't have enough information really to go farther than that, I think, at this point. But well, maybe we do, Ken. Maybe they could, the July meeting would be a meeting where people could attend and give input. But Ken and I, or at least me, I'm still a little confused about it. I'm just still getting information and hoping to hear back from them soon with some something easy to explain that we could send out.
And we're in a mode of just education for us and for you who came to this meeting. And we'd like to educate the members of our board of directors, but we're not in a position of, just like we weren't on the sanctuary, of advocating, because our board needs to get educated on stuff and make a decision. And, you know, there's.
So Asia
Sure.
has her hand up. I think we ought to call on
Okay.
her.
Yeah, go ahead, Azsha.
I just wanted to input, it's July 17th is going to be the Marine Resource Committee meeting, which is a subcommittee of the Fish and Game Commission. So only 2 of the 5 commissioners run that meeting. And so there's no actual action taken, but this July 17th meeting will be discussing the bidding results. So you had all the I think 80 something individual petitions and then 20 actual petition applications that were submitted. And so then the Fish and Game Commission tasked the CDFW staff to look at all the petitions and to categorize them in bin 1, which is a short-term, kind of like low-hanging fruit, not a lot of controversy that's going to be seen. And then bin 2, which is going to be everything else. So anything that is maybe controversial, but it's easy to do, that's still going to bin 2. Even if it's not controversial, but it's kind of in depth, like Point Sal maybe, that's probably going to go into bin 2. And so July 17th is really just going to be talking about the bidding results. And so then after that, we're waiting to see how they're going to start talking about the individual petitions like Point Sal. If they're going to do, you know, all the South Coast all the South Coast petitions will be spoken about, you know, at the August Fish and Game Commission meeting, and then South Central Coast will be spoken about at the November. We don't really know what that's going to look like. However, luckily the commission doesn't know either, so you are learning just as fast as the commission is, most likely. But I wanted to give that.
Where is the meeting in July gonna be?
Santa Maria, Santa something up near Sacramento and San Francisco.
Santa Cruz, perhaps.
I don't think so. We
Oh,
were
no.
asking.
Okay.
There'll be a remote access though, won't there, if people want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I highly recommend if you can attend just for a little bit, just to see what the process is, and see some of the different points and different stakeholders. Maybe get your own, you know, public testimony in as well. But yeah.
Thank you. So, Janie, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask Azsha to give us a couple of minutes on the other ones that are in Santa Barbara County.
Yeah.
In the Carpentry area is one that I know nothing about. And then there's,
Do you have a visual you could put up that we
Yes.
could look at?
great,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, I will start with what we're calling Mashopshino. So can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Great. So do not hold me to this map specifically. I believe NRDC has done some modification to this, but this is just so you guys get a general idea. And so you have the point starting at Loon Point around Padero Beach, and then ending right before the west end of the state beach. The modification that you would see in whatever new updated map NRDC has, there's a salt marsh that is right next to the state beach, the west end of the state beach, and it's a UC reserve, so that is already protected. So an extra protection is kind of redundant and may complicate things more and make it harder for them to do their job of protecting that area. So we have modified the boundary to reflect that. And so I'm going to scroll up, and this is pulled directly from the actual petition. So to get into the reason why NRDC first thought of this area, so within the MLPA, there is scientific guidance for the establishment of the network. It was created by a scientific panel, science bodies on a panel. And so they had recommendations for how far spaced these areas should be, the MPA should be. And as you can see with this line, there was about a 63.8 nautical mile gap for this area, which is a little bit over what the scientific body recommended. And so NRDC came up with this area, which was actually considered in the original MPA network process, but through different conversations and probably some concessions, it was not added to the original network. So that was the main reason why NRDC brought this to EDC, because this is our service area, and then through our own work, EDC found that this is also a shark aggregation spot, a juvenile white shark aggregation spot. There's documentation, there's current shark labs that are working on this, so that have tagged sharks. And so this area has been found to be an aggregation spot for juvenile white sharks. Note that we're not saying that this area should be protected for white sharks. That's not what MPAs are for. But we are saying that clearly they're coming to this area. They keep coming back to this area, which is something that we did not think was going to happen. And so sure, they may leave this area next year, but with climate change, with a warming ocean, with their food source being depleted, we should protect this area that the sharks have shown that they aggregate at. It has the right water temperature, it has the right habitat, it has the right, chlorophyll A, it has the right food source. So protect this area and let's try to keep it as healthy as we can while also meshing in, human use. To touch on the human use a little bit. So if you read the petition as it is on this original document, the ask is for an SMCA no take. That means that no commercial, no recreational take. The only take that would be allowed is tribal take. The only tribe that's known in the area that's federally recognized that would be able to use this is the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. However, they are more inland. You still have to worry about the coastal band and the Barbarino band. And so because of that, through conversations like these and that NRDC, San Ynez Band and EDC has been having with constituents in this area, we're most likely going to say some form of recreational take is allowed. What specific gear type, what specific species is still to be determined. But we really want to allow for the citizens of Carpinteria and of this locality that subsistence fishing is a thing and it's clearly a big thing and a big part of the culture. And so we don't want to hinder that. And so that's why NRDC and San Ynez Band and EDC are considering, not even considering, we're looking into how to word that for what we submit to the Fish and Game Commission. But this is just kind of a brief, I know that seemed like a lot, but that truly is the brief background of Mishopshino. Actually, I lied. Mishopshino, the name came from, there's a submerged Chumash tribe, believe, in this area that was named Mishopshino. It was the village, and so that's what the MPA is being named after. And so that's Mishopshino. I'll stop real quick for any questions, and I will go over the Anacapa one real quick, but that one should be shorter.
Thank you. That's fascinating. I didn't know anything about it. I heard a little bit about it, and now I know something. So thank you so much. And maybe it's something that SBCAN could even weigh in on with the board action at a point. But we need to have. We need more work.
I think the board would want to weigh in on all three. So if we can get the information together and come up with an action that we can take and put out information to our members too, that would be really helpful. So yeah, and if you can tell us about the other one now, it'd be wonderful.
Yes, let me pull that up. So apologies, this is literally pulled off of Google, but I find this map is the best to explain what I need to. So EDC is the main petitioner for this Anacapa Island State Marine Conservation Area. So this blue area on the west end of the island, We are not talking about the state marine reserve. This area allows no commercial recreational take. If you want to do science in this area, you need to get a permit. So it is highly protected, which is actually a good case study because Jesse Allstat, a scientist and researcher, has been going to this area for over a decade looking at the eelgrass meadows, specifically around Frenchie's Cove. And what she has found through her time, and she's done replantation efforts and recovery efforts, and they looked like they were succeeding until they weren't. And they weren't because this area allows for 2 months out of the year, it allows for commercial take of spiny lobster. And if you look at the regs, there's only one gear type allowed, and that's hard bottom. And that hard bottom trap being left in this area to, you know, catch the lobster gouges in the sand, and that destroys the eelgrass. It destroys the roots, which are very sensitive. It destroys the blades, and it can cause permanent loss, which is what Jessie and her team saw. And they were able to compare it to the State Marine Reserve side, this red side over here, and the eelgrass was doing fine. It was growing, it was flourishing, and you didn't see those huge gouges in the area. And so because of this research that she saw, EDC took it upon themselves with this MPA petition process happening through the Decadal Management Review, that we would say, hey, you know, we submitted an application. And so if you look at the petition as is, the original petition, we asked for the entire state marine conservation area to be turned into a state marine reserve, or from about shore to like 30 feet in depth would become a state marine reserve to stop the commercial take of lobster, which was identified as the issue. That, of course, changing this entire area to a state marine reserve, no one likes that option, really. It's going to be highly controversial. And so I started working with trying to find a solution that everybody is happy with. Well, almost as close as you can in discussions like these, getting everybody happy. And so if you look at the original Channel Islands documents, when they were establishing these MPAs in the area, they have, the term is not special closure, but I'm going to use that term for lack of better ones. There's a special closure that kind of borders very closely around the entirety of the island that says from shore to about 20 feet in depth that lobster traps cannot be set. That is an option to submit to the Fish and Game Commission and to the CDFW staff to say, hey, this is already in existence. Can we maybe push this to the end of the eelgrass habitat range, which is about 30 feet in depth, and then leave this area as a state marine conservation area? And so lobster traps can keep going on a little bit further, just not where these meadows are. And so that's what we're currently working on. I'm speaking with, you know, me, NRDC, standing as band, we're speaking with a lot of, you know, you guys, a lot of fishers, spear fishers, subsistence fishers, commercial fishers, to try to get the best solution that protects the environment, but allows for humans to still, you know, either consumptive or non-consumptive use of these areas. But yes, those are the two petitions.
Wow.
Who's working on it is Jessie connected to UCSB?
I don't know who she's connected to anymore. I know she was at a certain point. I know she has a NOAA email, but I don't know if that's still technically like in action. So I don't really know where she's landed right now.
I'm just wondering what, you know, what role the Marine Science Institute or the Bren School is playing, because Steve Gaines was so involved in the creation of these, the Channel Islands ones.
Yeah, I'm not able to say specifically where she is anymore, but I know, and it may have been the Steve Gaines that you're talking about, that her contact was for UC Santa Barbara, because I know she was working with them and using some of their connections to get some information on permits, permit holders for lobster traps in that area.
Yeah, and this probably involves some of the people from the Santa Barbara Harbor, but also Ventura Harbor. Interesting.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Azsha, and everybody for participating. And Gail, great questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me. I do have to hop off. But yes, thank you for the questions and, being engaged.
Yeah,
And thank you for
and-
being here. And
Thank
Azsha,
you.
I hope you might sign up to get our action alerts.
Yes. I don't know
Just
if I am.
SBCAN.org, and you can sign up, and you get hit up for membership and everything. You don't have to be a member, but we
Okay.
have 1,200 people that are signed up and get these messages about these kind of meetings.
Great. Yes, I will do so.
Love to have you anytime. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye. Okay. My item,
Truck racks.
truck racks. So let's see. Okay, somebody else. Okay, here we go. So we talked about this last month at this meeting. And I'm just scanning to see, okay, so who's here and who knows what on this topic? Jeannie, could you share your screen and put that map up that you?
Yeah, I'm just looking for it. I'll get it up in just a moment.
Okay. So as a bit of background, if you didn't know it, I'll tell you that there was a refinery called the Phillips Refinery, the Santa Maria Refinery. And it wasn't in Santa Maria, but it was right across the river from Santa Maria. And a lot of oil from the on-land oil, the onshore oil from Cat Canyon and the Lompoc area was piped or trucked to that refinery until about a little over 2 years ago. And then that refinery closed because Phillips 66 decided to start making biofuel at their refinery up in Rodeo in the Bay Area. So they closed the refinery here that took our local oil and refined it partway and then sent it up to the Bay Area. They closed that, and so the oil that's been produced over these last couple of years from Cat Canyon here in the Santa Maria Valley has been trucked in the meantime to other stations out in the Central Valley or to who knows where, we really don't know. And then in Lompoc, in the Purisima Hills, there's an oil field there, and they had a pipeline that went to the Phillips 66 refinery. So when that closed, they stopped production. So two years, almost 2.5 years ago, they stopped producing in the Purisima Hills. So now they want to produce again. And since there's no pipeline, they want to truck the oil to, yeah, there we go, out to the Central Valley to Coalinga. So this map shows down near the bottom the project location. It's a bad map, but it's fuzzy and everything. But that's where Jeannie's got the cursor. There's the project, and then the truck route would go a couple of miles south to down down Harris Grade Road, and then hit Highway 1, and then up to Vandenberg. There you go, and then continuing on Highway 1 down to Orchid, where it merges onto 135 up to Betaravia Road, a couple of miles on that to 101, and then onto the inset map from there another 130 miles out to Coalinga through San Luis Obispo County. So this proposal is to build a truck rack, which is a kind of a simple thing that it's some pipes and it's a rack. It's a place to load crude oil onto trucks, and they don't have one. In Cat Canyon, there's truck racks that all the oil producers there, and when the Phillips refinery closed, instead of sending their oil in trucks 8 miles to a pump station that sent it over to the Phillips refinery, they started hauling it out to Central Valley and Los Angeles and wherever. We don't really know where, but they did keep producing. But they had truck racks, so they didn't need any approval. But in this case, this company, Sentinel Peak Resources, needs county approval to install a truck rack, so they can haul 7+ trucks a day, every day, of crude oil to Coalinga for 50 years, up to 50 years. So that's the proposal. Now, recently, SBCAN and Sierra Club and Get Oil Out, with representation from EDC, fought the trucking of oil from the Gaviota Coast out to the Central Valley. And it was a big, big deal because it was talking about restarting the offshore platforms. And in this case, I think it's about as big a deal, but I'm not getting as much interest as that one had. That had hundreds or dozens of people coming to make testimony to the Planning Commission and to the county board, and the commission and the board denied the proposal to run 70 some trucks a day out to the Central Valley of crude oil. And they denied it mostly on the basis of hazards, of the potential for crashes and spills and fires and oils spilling into waterways. And so this one, it has all the same potential. It's fewer trucks per day, but it's, instead of 7 years, it's up to 50 years. And instead of 70 trucks, it's 7 trucks or maybe up to 10 trucks. But if you put that all together over the number of years, it's almost as big of a proposal. So the staff at the county energy department and in the planning department approved it. Well, the planning director approved this land use permit to build a truck rack at this location. And that was in spite of SBCAN submitted a letter identifying a lot of flaws with their mitigated negative declaration. And we pointed out that this other proposal had a full EIR and generated a lot of public testimony and was denied at 2 levels and then went to court. So we appealed on one basis that, well, it shouldn't have been approved at the staff level. It should be heard by the commission. There's a lot of public interest in these sorts of things, as evidenced by the last one, the ExxonMobil proposal. And so we filed an appeal, and the appeal will be heard by the Planning Commission on August 14th. If I got that right. Yeah, Wednesday, August 14th. That commission meetings start at 9 in the morning. Sorry if there's a helicopter overhead. That was noisy.
It's like an Air Force one, I think. Big.
Okay. So number one, there's a hearing on August 14th, and I would love people to come to that. And I'm going to issue a press release and try to generate more public engagement. And I've got that written, and I was waiting to hear for this meeting to see has anybody got any bright ideas of stuff that maybe I should be adding to that press release. But you know, there's a hearing. SBCAN's appealed this. It's another trucking of crude oil from our county elsewhere. I mean, out to the Central Valley for 100 and some miles. What did I miss, Jeannie?
Nothing.
Okay. So what I'm
You're-
missing is,
You're
Is-
using all of the same arguments that you used.
okay, thank you, Kathy.
Is that right? Is that?
Yep, it's a good question. So the central thing that motivates us to fight this sort of thing, it's climate change. It's
Yeah,
continuing the reliance on fossil fuels. And this is a drop in the bucket, but it's our bucket. And so we need to fight it here. And
Mhm.
but how the other one was won, it wasn't over climate change. A lot of people came to the hearings, and dozens of people came, and a lot of them spoke about that. Most people, they had all different comments and spoke from the heart, and it had an impact on the commissioners and on the county board. And in both cases, it was a 3-2 vote to deny. And so I want to see a 3-2 vote to deny again. And the motivation on the part of the people that are engaged in it, a couple of whom are not here right now, but one board member of ours and the executive director of CPA, who's the other one that wrote a letter commenting on the draft, on the draft mitigated neg deck. You know, the main motivation, it's about climate change, but you win it, as we won the other one, on the basis of the hazard. That's how it had to be won. And so that is how it was won. A lot of evidence was presented about and especially it was the risk on Highway 166. And Commissioner John Park, who drives his truck with his horse trailer on 166 and knows well the hazards on that road. And we were represented by EDC in the case, we and GOO, and which is Get Oil Out. And there was a lot of evidence able to be put together by EDC and interns that they hired on the accidents that had happened on 166 and 101 and on that whole route. And so that it was compelling evidence. And that was, I believe, that was the basis for the denial. So in this case, it's not 166. It's not the Gaviota Coast. It's not restarting offshore platforms, but it's restarting oil production in the Purisima Hills that's been shut down for 2 years, right above Lompoc. And trucking crude oil on this route that's on the screen through Lompoc, Vandenberg Village, Vandenberg entrance, Orcutt, Santa Maria, up 101, through San Luis Obispo, out to Highway 46 to 41, one lane each way roads, a lot of that, state highways that are, you turn your headlights on, kind of highways. So there's potential. There haven't been, as I've studied it, and there aren't as many accidents as have been on 166. So I'm hard pressed to come up with as compelling an argument on here's all these accidents that have happened. So you have to
Have you
deny.
talked to GU about it, or have you talked to EDC about it?
Yeah, I have. And I've, Linda Kropp sent me the database, the spreadsheet that they used. And that's where I know of one big accident that happened on Highway 41 that shut down the highway for several hours. But there's nothing on that spreadsheet that's as much as on 166 or the parts of 101 leading up to 166. So, and Linda, I'd love to have hired EDC to represent us on this. And we don't have a lot of money to hire them, but even if I had $10,000 to hire them or more, I don't know what it takes really to hire them. We're a client very often, but they have other sources. And so we're a client, we put up a little bit, and there's other people who put up a lot more, I think. And EDC itself puts up, and so they're in sometimes, but they're not in on this one. They don't have the capacity right now. They're short-staffed. And so they couldn't, I tried, and they couldn't get in on it. So I've filed the appeal on my board. Our board authorized us to do so. allocated $1,000 if we had to pay funds to, but you don't have to pay anything to file the appeal on an energy department thing. If it goes to the Board of Soups, then maybe we will. I'm not sure. And I believe we would appeal it to the board if the commission approves it. But I hope the commission denies it and then the oil company has to appeal it to the board.
So do you feel like you're too far inland for the Gaviota Coast Conservancy to help you?
Yes, I do. And the,
Did
so
you
I
talk
went to
to
the,
Anna Citron?
yeah. And Sarah, with the university organization that was such a big ally with our Exxon Begun group. And so she knows about it, and Sierra Club knows about it. Sierra Club was in this meeting at the beginning, but they're not here now. And so I don't have, I'm not feeling the love. It's just here we are. There's 6 of us here, and that's how I'm feeling. So I'm afraid I'm going to be standing up at this commission meeting in August by myself. So
Are the
But-
commissioners, I'm sorry, Ken, are the
ahead.
commissioners the same people that,
mostly,
denied? Okay.
thank you. They mostly are. District 5 is changed, and District 5, I'm more
Oh,
hopeful. Actually, the 4 and 5 have changed since then. And in District 4, I know the commissioner. He's even been to our house and delivered some plants that he gave us that have thrived. And so that's Roy Reed. And so he represents people that have oil in the ground. And so we've always been on the opposite side of these things at the commission and the county board, but we're friendly. He probably wanted to deliver that. No, I shouldn't say that. I thought he wanted to know where we lived, but there's no secret where we live. And anyway, I like Roy, so I'm talking to Roy before a housing commission, or a housing element hearing at the board. And we talked about this. It just came up as one of 3 or 4 things while we're killing 30 minutes waiting for the thing to start. And he was aware of this proposal, and he said, it's similar mileage, but it's for 50 years. He said to me. I said, yeah, Roy, I know it's for 50 years. It's almost as big of a deal.
So can you guys write a really powerful letter and muster whatever
Yeah, I hope so.
evidence you can get and then share it? We have a sister League of Women Voters up there, and I don't know whether NAACP will help you, but
no.
and if you talk to Joan Hartman, she can probably tell you all the names of organizations and people she's working with, and she might not need to recuse herself because this might not touch her land.
And and thank you. And I have talked to her about it, just in a casual setting at EDC where we're actually celebrating the Rancho La Laguna victory. And I mentioned, or it came up somehow, and then she said, so had we appealed it? And I said, yeah, we did appeal it. And she said, good. So that's a good sign. So
Well,
she's aware of it.
she's built a lot of credibility up in this more North County area, so she may be able to help you put together. And you got to organize.
Yeah,
The other people who should help you organize are the Fund for Santa Barbara. I mean, that's what they pride themselves on doing. Get them activated, figure out which groups at the university, might put some boots on the ground of a bunch of students who will come out and rabble rouse for you.
Thank you. I'm feeling the love.
Well, I think you're right. It's just, it's tough. We're much more organized and activist in South County. And, but but if we're serious about, not having oil and gas continue, and we're serious about climate change, and we're serious about safety, this is nuts.
Yeah, thank you. And welcome to Karen Mays.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here. And I didn't notice just when you checked into the meeting, but
Late.
welcome.
Yeah.
So thank you, Gail. Those are great suggestions. And I'll keep my chin up, and I'm going to be on the phone tomorrow to call the people that I was really hoping would be here.
What's
To-
again a date that you think this is gonna?
August 14th is the scheduled
Oh,
planning commission hearing. And I got it put off from July because the core people that I need to be there were not available, and there were 6 or 7 of them and they're not in this meeting either, but they weren't available. Maybe they're
I'm
on.
thinking that's the same date as all this lease stuff with Sable is gonna come up, with the State Lands Commission doing a hearing.
Yeah, it does sound like this
Is that, I think that's the 14th, or is it the 15th?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll have to follow up on that, and that I should not rule out that I can request an extension till September. But
Well, and what help will the Exxon Be Gone group give you?
yeah, well, I wish they'd give a lot of help, but it hasn't happened. And so I spoke at Exxon Be Gone on this subject. I got 5 minutes at the end of our last meeting, and Exxon Be Gone's about the offshore stuff, so I didn't expect to get a bunch of time on the agenda, but I wanted to bring this up because there's logical allies there. And so one who was there is the staff for Sierra Club in San Luis Obispo County. And so she reached out to me right after that and wanted to learn more. And we had a good Zoom call, the two of us, and talked about this. And so I was hoping she was going to be in this meeting today, and I think she'll be an ally. Most of the route is in San Luis Obispo County. So that's an ally that we really could use.
Well, EDC ought to really give you at least, some advice and names and connections. I know they're short-staffed, so they may not be able to take it on, but their problem is not money. So,
Yeah.
If there were somebody who was good at organizing or some intern or something that would give you some help, raising some money or getting the fund for Santa Barbara to help you out and get you some interns.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like what we need people to write letters and to show up at the hearing. So it's not just.
And if it's in slow, then, what about Cal Poly?
Yeah. Well, I'll be making calls tomorrow and Monday, and like I say, to the Sierra Club staff, Gianna in Slow. I was hoping there would be 10 people here that are all the big allies on this, and they're not.